There is a compound on top of a verdant hill. It has the look of an ant farm if the ants were collectors of gold as opposed to scrap food. It sits in the middle of a green ocean in between wave-like hills that rolled onwards as far as the eye could see. This almost perfect vista is interrupted only by a river in the north called Shanti. The river Shanti marks the borders of the Shah's land. It means peaceful. We all knew she rarely lived up to her name, but we also knew that believing in something hard enough might just make that thing true. As it were, Shanti at this time of year looked deceptively sleepy. All this in a region famous for its rice paddies. You might think, why bother describing honey to bees? A reasonable question, of course. It's just that the fields in this story are not rice paddies. Here, while everyone else toils for rice, we grow the pure strain of Avanti hemp. The compound was not always a ganja farm. It was once the Rajbari, home of the Bhuvanesh dynasty for some centuries. Despite all that time, one could comfortably make the claim that the most interesting period occurred just 100 years ago, when the last queen of Asambari threw herself down from the topmost minaret. 1,000 years of paternal history ended in a rush of wind and a spray of crimson blood. She had left everything her family had built, the empty gold mines, the terracotta walls, the pyramid-like temple roof, the divan-khanas and minarets. Left all of it with nothing but the lumps of her carcass, which stayed there for many days. There was no servants living there at the time, as she could not afford any. There was nobody there to clean her up, except for the insects and the moths. So Rajbari went into some disrepair until it was snapped up by an upstart merchant. Usually, a rich man buying a palace would have been no reason for concern, but... And here is the other special thing about Rajbari. The man who lives there today, Shah Esan, is not actually of merchant class. It is well known in the nearby, dwindling city that he is Shikari, a hunter. As Rani Ji, seneschal of the Rajbari, sped through the vast swaths of hemp on a horse-drawn rickshaw, she thought about these things. She thought about the history of the establishment in which she worked. There was more human drama and emotion in a single brick in that place than there was in the rest of the township combined. Maybe that was why she continued to work there, because of the drama. She made this journey every morning, 2 hours there and back, assuming the weather was good and the road uninterrupted. She would have preferred to stay there in a large room with servants, but Rani's mother was sick. Rani Ji adjusted the shuna hairband she wore on her forehead and then rested her skin against the metal frame of the retractable basket top. At least this thin tube of metal had remained cool despite the oppressive heat of the sun. She sighed. Today she would work so hard that she would sweat right through her makeup, through the flour and the coal, through the rouge, and through the fish scale paste she put on her lips. With every passing moment, she would look more and more like who she had been, as opposed to who she is. But she could not deny that despite this impending crisis, she loved working for Shah Esan. She loved her job. She loved lording over the riffraff. She will feel good once she got off
this damn bumpy little rickshaw.
Her hind was raw from sitting and her legs were cramped. She tried to think of work. That morning, there would be some new arrivals at the estate. 2 chefs, a nurse for the young khwajas, even an unmentionable, to tend to the weeds in the garden, or whatever other menial tasks she set for it. The chefs and the unmentionables were of little interest, but the nurse, she was different. Rani could not believe her eyes on that damp, humid day. The applicant arrived quietly, just as the day was beginning to end and the vast majority of the workers had left for home. Rani Ji was thinking about what the applicant had told her when she felt the sudden urge to pee.
Uh-oh,
said Rani. She hadn't noticed how heavy she had become. 2 hours on a rickshaw and still not close. She felt like she might burst.
Hey, driver, stop here. I need to pee.
The rickshaw driver pedalled to a stop by some thick, swampy bushes.
Damn it,
thought Rani.
Nowhere better than these bushes. And the ground is flooded. Oh, of course. I'm going to ruin my dress.
She shifted from one leg to the other. She hated answering calls of nature. After one last moment of childish defiance, she ran into the foliage, her anklets clinking and clanking away. The water parted loudly. The cool brown surface climbed up to her shins. She thought she saw a firm, dry piece of tree root, strong enough for holding, and so she chose to climb a little further up. As she brushed a large leaf aside, she saw a cobra. It presented its open crown, but a deft kick under its pliant body launched it into the air. Its death rattle had barely begun before it was just a whisper in the wind. No snakes, not even a cobra, could match Rani Ji. Rani hiked up her skirt and crouched. If there was one thing she missed about being a man, it was having a penis to piss with. She was sure the surgeon had messed up, because no matter what she tried, she always peed in 2 cross-directional lines. That was the Khwaja Sara's price, however. She felt the hot steam against her calves.
Jaldi, Jaldi.
She thought, worrying the driver might consider leaving. She had made the terrible decision to pay half up front. Finished, she looked back across the bog and eyed a rock, some jutting roots and other footholds she might leap across. She crouched down again and breathed. She was a world-class expert at Malakhamb, used to run as a boy, and even wrestled with the Pilbanis. There would be none of that in her next feat, but it had made her body powerful. She let the tension in her muscles build, and she was off. Rani elegantly crossed the distance back to the road. Rock, root, and then stump, onto the swampy embankment she had passed over for privacy. She landed with a skid.
Still have it.
She climbed out between the bushes, and to her sublime pleasure found the rickshaw driver waiting. She noticed he was wearing a white shirt. She walked up, hand extended, and said,
I've had some trouble back there. Give me some of your shirt.
The man's face fell. He opened his lips as if he were about to protest, surprising Rani.
Perhaps my Shuna hairband has fallen too low.
She pushed the headpiece up higher, to show her 4-pointed star and the promotional diamond. She was, to him at least, 3 whole casts above. His eyes hovered up to the mark, and without further delay, he cut a swath of fabric from his shirt.
Good,
she said.
Smart.
She wiped up and down her legs, and her mind returned to work.
It will be an uproar,
she thought.
But I will maintain the peace. It is my house.
Rani Ji dismounted and briskly traversed the freshly cut lawn towards the Torana arch. This and the rest of the archways were adorned with white marble. She kissed her fingers and brushed them against the stone in thanks, grateful for their protection. Inside, the older buildings were made of a red terracotta, topped with a curved Dochala-style roof. She passed the barracks and stable, looped around the main house, ignoring the various greetings thrown at her like balls, till she found herself in the curated gardens of Shah Esan's estate. This place, this ancient bath, was the oldest section of Rajbari. It had been left untouched since Bhuvanesh himself ordered for steps to be carved into the glassy lake. Bhuvanesh was reported to have said that no one should be permitted to further transgress on nature's most peculiar beauty. You see, this small body of water was a most perfectly shaped square, a most unnatural coincidence. The lines measured 1,000 times were all equal. The water was green even when the sky was blue. Every time Rani approached those descending stairs, she swore she could imagine the last queen bathing in the waters, golden skin glistening in the sunlight. Shah Esan was sitting on a stool centered on an imaginary line. On either side of him were the 2 halves of Rajbari Lake. He could picture those angles in his sleep. Rani Ji knew that when Shah Esan had fallen into one of his contemplative moods, it was best to let him think. So she stalked up to his seat, pushing aside the hookah pod that smelt strongly of hemp, and waited. Her eyes fell on his work. It was a bird's-eye view of his gardens. In the centre was Rajbari Lake, and then to her dismay, 4 bridges all leading to a centre keystone. There was a platform for sitting in the middle. Shah Esan, it seemed, was planning on turning the lake into a charbagh of sorts.
Why?
Thought Rani Ji. Nobody had ever touched the lake before.
Foreigners, riding in on their beasts and changing what's already perfect.
Rani Ji wanted to take a better look at the work. Ehsan was never one to shy away from criticism, especially from his Senachar, whom for better or worse he trusted. Rani Ji reached out for the plans, her eyes resting on Shah Esan, looking for any signs of his disapproval. None came. If anything, Rani Ji was quite sure he wanted her to look.
Worry not, Shah Esan. You've certainly caught my attention.
She picked the work up by a folded corner. As she pulled, the paper peeled off the table, revealing his disfiguring intentions inch by inch. Her heart almost burst in terror. Appearing behind the plans was a singular eyeball, hovering an inch or so in the air. It was a perfect sphere of blue skin. The faceless eyelid blinked twice at her, hiding and revealing the dim orange orb within. Agasora's right eye. The Shah's spy made Rani's skin crawl. It was a snake's eye, and it was a snake in function. The slit-like pupil bulged about, scrutinizing her a little longer till she snapped.
I'm right in front of the Shah.
The Shah breathed through his nostrils angrily. Agasora looked a little taken aback. He closed its eye, and as the folds of skin met, so too did it collapse into itself, compressing into a fine line of ethereal blue magic. Then it was gone. Shah Esan stirred from his meditation.
Rani Kazum, must you be so loud?
He said in a confusing mix of Dari and Sarakesian.
My apologies, Shah Esan,
said Rani, hastily transitioning into his language.
Nobody likes to feel like they're being watched in the dark.
The Agasura twins are good at what they do. They must watch everyone, Rani Kazum. That includes you.
As Shah Esan said the words aloud, they seemed to truly register on his mind, as though he had just spoken a truth he had always known, but never wanted to admit. Somehow, it made the truth bolder in colour. Concern filled his face. He rubbed his lips and fell so quiet. You might have thought he was more statue than man.
Are you thinking about their contract?
Yes.
He responded after a subtle raise of the head.
When my father, Shah Esan, came to Rajbari, he felt an oppressive presence lurking behind the lush hedges.
He recited for the 100th time.
My uncle, a powerful shaman, lured the two Agasuras out of hiding and bound them.
Shah Esan motioned, tightening a knot with his hands.
But to contain a jinn is no easy task. A shaman may do so, but what about when he passes, as my uncle eventually did? The only way to keep a jinn in check is to trap it with an enchanted cage or to bind them to a contract. My uncle, sadly, was no enchanter.
Shah Esan reached for a tulip-shaped glass filled with wilted tea leaves and then realised it was empty.
Will you order me some tea?
He asked.
How would you like it?
Shah Esan thought for a second.
The way my mother made it. Chai it is then.
They drank the tea in silence.
How long do you have left with the eyes?
Asked Rani.
2 weeks. This place is about to become unfathomably large, Rani Kuzum. Acres of land. A palace fit for any sultan.
He searched the lake with his own less capable eyes. Rani wondered what he thought he might find.
We've enjoyed a brief time of totalitarian efficiency. Oh,
Groaned Shah Esan, the thought of all that control and lost efficiency breaking his heart.
no doubt work will become slower. Crops will be stolen. Punishment will have to become harsher to compensate. I'll have to spend more time in the fields, which means less time with nobility.
Shah Esan reached out with his fingers as though he could feel something.
Just as everything was falling into place.
Rani Ji enjoyed the brief respite from her long day. On the other side of Rajbari Lake, 2 young boys dressed like Nawabs charged towards the water. They stripped off their livery as they ran, till they wore nothing more than their briefs. They dived in, their brown bodies disappearing into the water like dissolving coffee. She noted the flicker of a smile on Shah Esan's face as he watched them, Sabbir and Rogan, his sons. A third boy stood by. He was a little taller and a little broader than the others. A crescent-like talwar hung from his belt. His name was Amir. Amir was Shah Esan's half-brother, a point of personal contention. The Shah always liked to keep distance with such sources of shame. Amir went about, picking up the discarded clothes, folding them neatly and stacking them up. When he was done, he stood watch over the others.
What do you think of my plans?
Asked Shah Esan, changing the topic, but never really changing the topic. Rani Ji held the glass to her lips, buying for time.
They are technically sound, maybe even perfect in their theoretical execution. The bridges would hold, should one want to build over Bhuvanesh's favoured bath, that is. I do want to.
He said with a nod and a tilt in his voice, as though he was answering his own question. He adjusted his orange fez and smoothed out the dark curtains of his hair.
Yes, I do.
Has Shamana seen them?
She has.
Shamana was the architect at Rajbari. She was also a fellow Khwaja Sara.
Shah Esan, think of your mother and her family. They've yearned for this place for generations. She loved this lake as it was. Surely the worthy Bey would not want to ruin her memory. If my mother's family could afford to buy and rebuild this place, they would have. As it is, my father's family builds charbags. My cousin has built the most glorious palace in all the world's steppe, and there they have a charbag. So I too must have a charbag.
Rani wanted to fight for this sacred place, but she knew she would lose. Shah Esan had made his choice already, and she could not convince him otherwise.
We have many new employees starting today.
She said.
Employees? Yes, well, I'm sure you'll take care of them. Don't dismiss me, Shah Esan. You'll need to take interest in such things, considering your spies will be free soon. Yes, I guess you're right. One of your new employees has sparked my interest. It's your new maid. She's applied for the work, even though her natural disposition requires a higher station. She's from the Paradise Ashram, a priestess and dancer of Rad and Radha.
Esan pressed the lip of the tulip-shaped glass to his mouth.
Interesting,
He muttered.
So, why did you hire her?
Asked Esan.
Well, I couldn't not hire her. How could I deny a priestess? I've seen her dance before. In fact, I think one of those times, the first time, was with your father. You were just a boy then. I don't remember.
Interrupted Esan. It was a dismissive gesture. This annoyed Rani. Rani for one loved the Satriya.
Shall I prepare Shah Dipika's bedchambers?
She asked, referring to the mother of the boys in the lake.
No. I've been corresponding with her, and we've both agreed she should stay where she is, in the frozen kingdom of Meru. In fact, I have some new design ideas for her room. Royal blue, I think, with some gold. I'll need you to procure some stoneworkers and painters from Dari. I'm thinking of my cousin there in particular, who's good with that sort of thing. He graduated from the House of Wisdom with a special award and a contract with the Shah's nephew.
Blue paint, gold art, and wall paintings. Rani put them together.
Is somebody else moving into Shah Dipika's room?
Shah Esan smiled.
If all things go well, then perhaps. A new wife?
Shah Esan nodded.
Is this why you've hired a nurse? Yes.
He said, his voice dropping to a threatening pitch.
You are not to tell the boys. There is no way to guarantee they'll like their new mother. So, a nurse in the meantime for them to grow close to will suffice. A mother's touch is integral in times such as this. Will it be an Avantish wife?
Rani pushed.
No. A Sarkeesian sultana.
A queer look fell on his face. He stood up and looked beyond the garden where he could see the hemp.
A sultana amongst the hemp fields of Asambari. A sultana marrying me. How high the Shikari have climbed. She shall be queen of the grasslands, the intoxicated princess, a true lady of heaven.
Shah Esan crouched by the pot and blew onto the ashes. The half-black, fire-eating coals stirred back into life. The water in the pot bubbled, and the smell of cannabis became even stronger. He placed his face, skinnier as of late, close to the fumes. Then he drew some of the stupefying vapour into his lungs. He grinned like an idiot.
Coming here was the best thing my father had ever done. I love this place. I love Avanti. I love this sacred leaf. It calms me when my mind is most tormented by my thoughts, my fears, my plans. But still, I must not let my father's blood be diluted.
He looked over at his sons playing in the water.
The Zamindars let the Rajbari fall into disarray. The Shahs will raise it from the ashes, like the children of Simurgh.
Rani Ji, tired of her master, rose to dismiss herself. Shah Esan held the pipe out to her.
I am very busy today,
she said, trying to be polite. Shah Esan frowned, his six-sided bindi creasing in the process.
Even more reason to accept. It will help you stay calm.
He made a compelling point, she thought. She took the pipe and held it between her lips. And then came sweet, hot euphoria.